This is the Authentic Change Podcast, and I am Mike Horne. Authenticity reflects what we want from each other and our organizations. Open communication, trust, community, fun, and opportunity. I want to help you to do your best in your personal and professional relationships. This podcast delivers expertise, insights, and approaches on authentic leadership, to live your purpose, to lead from your values, to establish connected relationships, to steward people and culture change, to build and sustain prosperity, and to open doors and possibilities. This podcast will assist you in paving the way forward to personal, team, and organizational prosperity.
Welcome to this edition of the Authentic Change Podcast with Mike Horne. Today, I'm joined by Michele Medved, who I am delighted to have with us in our virtual studio. Michele is a longtime contributor and to corporate learning. She's a corporate learning professional, a senior instructional designer. She works in change management, and she's the author of The Guide to Working with Subject Matter Experts, or SMEs. Michele's from the Los Angeles area, and she, I know from our earlier discussions, is a person who's passionate about facilitating learning opportunities to improve workplace performance. So, Michele, again, delighted that you're here. Tell our audience about yourself.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Mike, for having me on your podcast. It's a great honor. So I have been in learning and development for the last 20 years, starting out in an IT department, answering questions and putting together guides on old applications that many people have never heard of today, and then moved into working in training and development, technical writing, performance improvement, and also change management. And one of the things that has been consistent across all my years of experience is working with subject matter experts. That's really the common ground across everything. And I've had many opportunities to work with subject matter experts, ranging from, on the kind of normal engineering side to actually interviewing chefs and salespeople, and really have been fortunate enough to work across many different industries in my career. And I'm excited to share what I have learned about working with SMEs with you, and which is captured in my book, which is called The Guide to Working with Subject Matter Experts, Key Strategies to Bring Expert Knowledge to Workplace Learning.
Well, that's great. Michele, let's start off with the question is, what is a subject matter expert, or SME as you describe? I'm sure a lot of people aren't familiar with that term.
Right. So a subject matter expert is a person who has expertise and experience in a specific area. So what does that actually mean? That could mean that they have many years of experience, like I have 20 years of experience in working with SMEs, strangely enough. But it could also mean in this age of urgency, in this age of continually changing information, that maybe that person only has a month of experience. But guess what? They're actually ahead because they have more experience than someone else. So that's what makes them a subject matter expert. And that's why somebody else will come along and be interested. What have you learned? What do you know? What are your experiences? What are those tips that you can share with me? Because I'm new. I'm a novice. We call people who new novices. And that person wants to glean as much as possible from that subject matter expert.
So a subject matter expert, it's not to be a subject matter expert, it's not dependent on credentials or experience, but rather it's some combination of both. Is that right?
That's completely correct. It's going to be a combination of expertise. It's going to be also your experience. But as I just mentioned, sometimes your experience may just be a little bit more than the person who doesn't know anything. And it's also about influence. It's also about, can I give you information that that sticks, that ultimately is going to be approved by the higher ups in your organization? Do I have the authority to give you that information? Something that, go ahead, Mike.
No, please.
Something that I want to just elaborate a little bit more about is that expertise, and what does that expertise actually mean? And that's where the concept of tacit knowledge is so important when it comes to working with subject matter experts, collaborating with them, eliciting content-rich information. Tacit knowledge is different from explicit knowledge. Explicit knowledge is something that is really the top. If you think about it, knowledge is a pyramid. That explicit knowledge is really only about 5 to 10% of that whole body of knowledge. And you think about what's under the water, it's that tacit knowledge, right? So it's about 80 to 95% of knowledge. That's a lot. And what's explicit is going to be captured and documented. What's tacit is going to be really based on someone's personal knowledge and their experiences. So it's going to be their insights, their observations, their intuitions. And what I think is fascinating is their mental models of how they perceive the information. And our role as learning professionals is to elicit this information from the subject matter experts, to really ask the right questions so that we can elicit that tacit knowledge. And what's often challenging sometimes is they don't even remember sometimes, if they've been in the field a long time, how they, gathered that knowledge. So we want to ask the right questions and tap into their knowledge. We need to leverage that knowledge of the SMEs before it walks out the organization and before it gets lost.
And what makes a person, we've talked about experience and credentials and different types of knowledge. Often so much of workplace development happens on the job, or most of workplace learning happens on the job. So I might call on Harriet or Giselle or Quentin for to help me learn the ropes, or to help me learn a process, or to help me learn a system. And that's, informal learning that contributes to performance. When does a person become a subject matter expert that's of interest to other people? Or is it human resources folks who are interested in these subject matter experts? Or how does it relate to the field of people development?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for asking that, Mike, because just in the last 2 days, I read 2 articles in Forbes magazine. And what these articles have in common is they all focus on the concept of upskilling and reskilling in terms of growth and stability and achieving business goals. The difference between the two, upskilling is about adding additional skills to somebody's existing skills, whereas reskilling is learning a completely new job. So why has this suddenly become so important? Well, a lot of things have happened, as you know, in the last 3 years with the pandemic. We have major technological changes, work pattern shifts, the recession, customer behavior change. All these things have happened. And what it's led to, as reported in a McKinsey survey, is that many leaders actually believe that building internal skills is even more important than hiring, redeploying, or contracting. And I find that particularly fascinating. So building that knowledge and growth within individual existing employees has become incredibly important in terms of how do we close the skill gap? And also, how do we ensure that we are equipped to deal with all these changes that are going on? How do we get that internal mobility? And how do we have that adaptability that gives us the competitive edge? So going back to the SMEs, really, I believe they are the key to upskilling and reskilling in your organization. And I believe that if their knowledge is not leveraged, then you are missing an incredibly important opportunity to gather that tacit knowledge, that, if you look at that iceberg, is under the water. And really, what my book emphasizes is keys, secrets to collaborating effectively with SMEs to get that information across the board, from preparing to meet with them and ask them questions to, my last chapter, which is what if things go wrong? You can do all the preparation that you want, but things may go a little bit off track. So there's a chapter devoted to when things go off track as well. So yes, that's really how I see SMEs fitting in with the larger picture of of growth and development at the moment in companies.
Right. That's great. So we know how a person becomes a subject matter expert, and we know their utility in developing learning curriculums, learning opportunities, learning experiences. But how does somebody in an organization or in a team or somebody who's consulting to an organization, how do they know who these subject matter experts are?
Well, that's really important to be able to identify them. And identifying them, it really needs to come from the leadership level, from the stakeholders in any big initiative. They're going to know who has that expertise. So it could be a top-down approach where they are identifying, or it could be a bottom-up approach. Sometimes people self-identify. And what I've seen in some organizations is when they do establish things like a mentoring network, something that's going to be more informal, then they ask people to fill out skills assessments so that people self-identify. I'm an expert on this tool. And I've seen that those kind of initiatives are very successful because, that allows somebody who's looking for somebody who has more experience than them in a specific tool or process or best practice to tap into that person's expertise. And I really would encourage organizations to do both, to do the top-down approach and to do the bottom-up approach where people are self-identifying.
And these SMEs really then work in service of designing solutions to pressing problems in organizations. Is that right? Do I have that right?
Yes, you do. But it's something to also consider that SMEs, it's not their full-time job to provide content. And that's something that I think it's very important for people in instructional design or anyone actually who's trying to learn something from somebody else to consider. Yes, they may have developed that expertise and experience, but they also have a job and they have pressing deadlines and they don't work for you. And also sometimes they may resent being asked to do a second job. So that is where, we need to consider tapping into what you do, that kind of mutual integrity, okay? Mm-hmm. That it's going to be a give and take relationship, all right? So on my side as a corporate learning professional, I'm going to receive this great information that I need. But on the other side, I need to be able to give back to the SME. I need to firstly explain to them the what's in it for me, what's in it for them at least, in terms of what is the business impact of them sharing this information with me? How is it going to help the business at the end of the day? There is power, obviously, in knowledge and information, and I want them to appreciate that they are contributing to business goals by sharing that information with me. And another way in which I need to be very giving is being respectful of their time and not wasting their time. And that is why preparing to meet with an SME, preparing to ask them questions is so critical because I want to be respectful.
Yes, it's so true. I mean, I know that one of the topics that you cover in your work is, working with these subject matter experts in an age of urgency. And my observation about capitalism is that everything is urgent.
Yes, right.
We got to get this report done. We got to satisfy this particular stakeholder.
Right.
And while that provides, drive and impetus, I would imagine that, unless it's a new technology or a new process, many of the issues that you're working at are at the core of learning fundamentals. And given the diversity of the workplace today, how does all of this, wrap up in some sense of urgency?
Right. So things are changing. Things are changing rapidly. And in terms of what I do, it means that you're not always going to have time to create an e-learning course or to create an instructor-led course.
Right.
You just don't have the time to do that. So I do give some tips in my book, in the chapter, The Age of Urgency, around that. So, in a case where you do need immediate answers from SMEs, what we found to work, especially like after the rollout of a new product or a big launch, we found that the best way to deal with those immediate questions is actually to have a platform, WebEx or Slack, or teams and have an SME manning that or managing the questions so that they can provide immediate answers. Because ultimately, just like in, customer service where your goal in life, most companies, the goal is to delight the customer. That's really what learning has to do. And the customer is the person who needs to use that information to do their job. And they don't want to wait around for that information. Otherwise, they're going to be frustrated. They can't do what they need to do. So in that case, no, it's not going to be an early learning course. It's going to be immediate answers to your questions.
Right. And I suspect, and I know you've done work in this area, is that often these learning professionals or people who have to work with or need to work with subject matter experts, some of the work is around managing time and deliverables. And I would also, it's about a certain level of expertise that people who are designing courses, designing experiences, thinking about constructing learning that meets people quickly and in real time. What makes a person capable, in addition to managing time and deliverables, program management skills? What makes for a person who's capable and confident and able to work with subject matter experts when designing learning?
Right. So I think you need to have a background in instructional design to know how to convert that information. And something that I was thinking about this week in terms of this whole topic was actually cooking. And this is something that I think is a relevant metaphor for what we're doing here, because the ingredients that the SMEs give us, they need to be fresh and they need to be good ingredients,
right.
All that content that they're giving us, because otherwise we're not going to come up with anything that's, tasty or delicious or good. But at the same time, as an instructional designer, once you have those good ingredients, it's your responsibility to put them in the correct order, to make sure that they're correct. And that means that you may need to validate with more than one SME that your information is correct, especially when it comes to soft skills and developing competencies around things like leadership and customer service excellence and all that. You want to get some input from more than one SME around that, right? Because that way you make sure that you're getting that kind of triangulation and you're getting a representation of different perspectives across different SMEs.
Where do we? Please.
No, go ahead, Mike.
Where do we find these instructional designers? Are they just in big corporations? Are they in consulting firms? Where are instructional designers?
So most organizations have learning professionals who work with lines of business to create training. And these days, we have lots of different titles. It could be an instructional designer, which is actually quite a traditional title for us. These days, it's more about being learning experience designers.
Right.
So taking into account that learning is so much more than just, instruction. It's all that informal components that you mentioned earlier. So it's that whole experience of learning and obtaining the information you need to do your jobs.
So the range of work for an instructional designer can vary greatly. You might be working with a physician on certain procedures or processes or conveying information to patients, as well as someone in an organization who's doing maintenance work or something to that extent to help other colleagues. Is that right? I mean, can it really direct almost anywhere occupationally?
Sure. Absolutely. And that's why I've been so fortunate to work in so many different industries, because we are needed in different industries to elicit that information from subject matter experts and make sure that I have the acronym, we want to get that content-rich information. And the acronym that I have for that is FRED, which actually stands for focused, that the information that you want targets a problem, a task, or a topic. It's relevant. It should be relevant to the audience. It's engaging. So we got to bring facts to life. And a lot of, when I work with subject matter experts, I really try probe for stories, for examples, and for scenarios, because as I mentioned earlier, that really is going to help me tap into that tacit knowledge that is currently not documented. And the D is deep. I want to make sure that I am digging down and asking what else and why. And, give me an example of how you were successful or how you overcame a challenge. That's really what we want to do when we get that FRED information, the content-rich information.
Oh, that's amazing. And in this day of micro-learning, people with, short attention spans, I've heard some people say that it all happens in, 10 seconds. Sometimes, how is the instructional designer fitting into that kind of world?
Right. So we fit right in there, and part of our responsibility is to assess how to best present information in terms of the needs of the audience, in terms of the timelines, and in terms of really at the end of the day, it's about getting them to change behavior. And what's the best way that we can do that? And it's maybe something as simple as an infographic, or as complicated as a simulation.
Right. I think about, in earlier times, instructional designers, perhaps they laid out content flows. Mm-hmm. They had objectives, all related back to performance measures in an organization. What about soft skills? Like, not that any of these are soft skills, but what about influencing others? Or what about learning to manage conflict well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So once again, you want to analyze what the learners need to do at the end of the day.
I see. Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely where you always want to start, no matter how short your training is going to be. You want to assess the outcome. What do you want the outcome to be, and how can you measure that outcome? And then going from there.
Please. Yeah, so I'm imagining that in certain circumstances or certain situations, that instructional designers work a lot with technology now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we work with both technology and with best practices. And in both cases, you want to analyze and you want to be able to connect with an SME or more than one SME to give you that technical information or to give you the best practices. So much about what we're doing today is about technology.
Right.
But even more important than technology is the people who use that technology. And that's where your best practices are going to come in. And that's once again where you want to elicit that tacit knowledge from the SMEs about success, how they were successful, what tactics they used, what worked for them, and what could work, for other people in the same position.
So there can be many applications of work for an instructional designer. It could be orienting a new employee. It could be upgrading employees on a particular skill set or process. It could be some regular ongoing evaluation to making sure that certain operating procedures are followed and that employees feel good about them. Is that right? Or
yeah, absolutely. And really, we're coming back to the role of the SME. It's really about taking people from a novice to being proficient. And in the olden days, it was pretty easy to do that. You would work alongside somebody and you would teach them and you would show them how to do it. But with the change and with industrialization, that's just no longer possible, Right. So yes, you may get a mentor who you're lucky enough to help you along with specific skills. But what we really want from the SMEs is the knowledge to take people from novice to proficient, take people from being unconscious incompetence to having some level of competence and that allows them to do their job. And I really believe that the SME is key to making the connection between being a novice and being proficient.
So that we work in the conscious competence space.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And so in this conscious competence, I mean, when a company or a client or a group decides to invest in instructional design services, what can they expect, to achieve?
I think it does help you to streamline the whole process of analyzing to actually putting out a learning deliverable. It helps to really be conscious of the process of somebody moving from being a novice to being competent and what is involved in that in terms of information that's engaging and relevant and deep, and then also getting them to apply what they know in a safe environment before they actually go out and do something on the job. And that's really important for those kind of high-level technical skills.
A lot of learning that I've observed in adults is very messy. It doesn't happen in a straight line.
So true.
Sometimes there's guilt and anxiety, and rarely is it fun. When there's some learning going on. So how do instructional designers account for that?
So content needs to be engaging for sure. And the way that it needs to be engaging is really tapping in to what people are going to do with it at the end of the day, because that's the what's in it for me. And if it's relevant to me, yes, I'm going to be very interested. So the more that we do use elements like gamification and stories and branching scenarios, those are all some tactics that we use. But really it comes down to making it relevant and making it targeted to what people have to do with that information at the end of the day.
At times, when I've worked with instructional designers, when I led human resources in organizations and had learning and development people reporting to me, often the instructional design work was expensive and it was long. Maybe I had a unique experience in that regard, but I recall, when some would come to design simulations, or they would think about gamification for onboarding. It was expensive and time consuming. And certainly what I've observed today, particularly with some forms of gamification, is it's almost cookie cutter. If you have had a good back-end developer, you can really put your game to use in a lot of different ways. Is that true still? Is it long and complicated? I know we've talked about managing time and deliverables.
No, I don't believe it should be cookie cutter or expensive. I think that if you are looking at things from an outcome perspective, then you can put together something that's not going to be long and expensive. I think you could put together something that meets the needs of your audience. And when working with subject matter experts, sometimes, and this is one of the things that I talk about in my book, sometimes you get people who are so passionate that they want you to put everything in your training. They're like, throw it all in, and they just want to talk about it for hours with you. And that's definitely one of the jobs of an instructional designer, and that's filtering the nice to know from the need to know. So once we do have those learning outcomes, that's where we should be going from there.
It seems that the instructional designer then is really, while they may be, with the human resources professionals or people and culture professionals in an organization, it sounds like the instructional designer is really a business partner, somebody who is bringing in a disciplined approach to help the company overcome or engage in some of its learning challenges in the most efficient and the most effective ways.
Yeah, I think that's a great description. And we do see ourselves as business partners. And many people who do what I do work within different lines of business.
Yes.
So that they are allied with the goals of the business and are able to help the business meet those goals in a very, conscious way.
Empathy is a big topic in leadership, whether we're talking about authentic leadership or some other form of leading others or being with others. There is the value of empathy. And I know in your book, you write about this and you talk about it. It's not often a concept I would associate with instructional design. So say more about that.
Right. So empathy is really about what we were talking about earlier, about that the importance of the give and take when you collaborate with instructional designers. And in terms of what you're giving, it really starts with empathy and understanding where they're coming from and that they do have limits on their time. And when I do work with new instructional designers, one of the important activities we do is we workshop how to work with instructors, how to work with the SMEs. And it really starts by putting yourself in their shoes. So I ask them to think about something in which they have expertise. For example, a recent workshop they came up with, I'm an expert in helping my friends book their travel plans, or I'm an expert in working with my dogs, of special type of dogs. So I asked them to think, well, if you were, if you had a novice, somebody, a newbie coming to you, and you had very limited time, what would be some of the do's and don'ts that you would want that person to follow when working with you? And that really is kind of an eye-opener for them.
Well, that's a great observation. And, as you work with people, I would imagine that even processes, back to your, food analogy earlier, some processes may seem very simple, like scrambling an egg. And the cook or the chef behind that, as he or she or they describe an experience, may forget different things like how to crack it the egg, or, don't forget the whisk, or add a dash of salt or pepper at the end. Is that all true? I mean, that you help break down those processes?
Oh yeah, for sure. That, we would provide the steps, but also, as we say, color around those steps. Which, I mean, I love that. And, that kind of, thinking like, there's the black and white. Okay, I crack open the egg. But, what are some of the nuances around that? Are there any? I want to know what they are. And I want to find that out from my subject matter expert.
Yeah, I'm often told that a true chef's hat has 100 folds. Because there are 100 ways to cook an egg.
I love that. I love that.
To prepare an egg. So something to that effect,
yes.
Right? So
yes,
I don't know if that's true or not. But then what happens, it's an interesting question. As an instructional designer, what happens when you come across disinformation or just bad information that, somebody may think because they've been doing it for so long, they have the credentials and the experience, or maybe they haven't been doing all that long, but they have the credentials, and it really doesn't conform to the informal processes in the organization of how things get done.
Right. So that's where we definitely need to validate everything that we do at the end of the day. And in the job that I'm currently in, legal is a very big part because it's a compliance industry. So, once we've worked with our SMEs, then we still have to get that final sign-off from legal to make sure that everything's in line.
So really good instructional designers make all of that content that employees are often required to take, whether it's some form of compliance training or something else. An instructional designer, I'm guessing, can really make a big difference in terms of engagement and really time to value.
Absolutely. And, definitely starts from onboarding. But as we've spoken about, these days, the focus is also moving to that upskilling and reskilling to ensure that companies have that competitive edge. It's becoming so important.
It's just almost like talent acquisition. And in many roles today, there are no employment applications because throughout the process, the candidate has been successfully entering that information into a database, somewhere, so that on, day 0 or day 1, I'm not stuck with more forms. How does instructional design, how might it help proactively in terms of anticipating issues in organizational life?
Yeah, so that's a great question. That's where, like, your subject matter expert in onboarding, maybe somebody who completed it 3 months ago. They're the expert because they went through the onboarding. And so they can give you feedback about actually what was hard for them and what they found challenging and where they ran into issues. And then you may also want your subject matter experts to be someone 6 months into their job, and then maybe even a year. So you may want to mix up your subject matter experts, because really that experience that they have should not be so long ago that they have forgotten how to do it. They should be able to be fresh enough to know what it was like to do the job.
And I guess this is, coming back to our, sort of the top of this discussion. I suppose this is where an instructional designer, she or they really earn their gold in a way about eliciting this sort of subjective and tacit knowledge or hidden knowledge from subject matter experts.
Yes, absolutely. I think this is something that one needs to develop skills in. And I think that if somebody who's not an instructional designer looks at my book, I think they can still find value, though, because they can learn how to, help somebody who's a novice become an expert by working, with somebody who already has that expertise. So it's taking them along that continuum.
It's a great question about how do you expand the knowledge that instructional designers bring to the world?
Mm-hmm. So I think I would expand it by really looking at anyone who wants to become more knowledgeable in something. That's really what we all want to do. We all want to gain some knowledge, and sometimes it's formally and sometimes it's informally. I mean, really, YouTube with its videos has been an incredible resource for people in terms of how to move along that continuum pretty quickly, right? I just saw a recent video of somebody who in Ukraine who was learning how to use a weapon, and they were watching a YouTube tutorial. So that whole process of them going from zero to using the weapon took 10 minutes.
Right.
In a video.
Yeah. And it just demonstrates, I think what you bring is that learning instruction can be brought to many industries, whether it's helping people in situations just as you described, or could be in hospitality or finance or technology or automation or healthcare or biopharma, any of those disciplines, right? That's what your story illustrates.
Yeah, for sure. And I've had a lot of fun in different industries. Working also in the food industry, where there was one company where everyone was encouraged to eat a lot. And then I worked in another industry where there were scales in the kitchen area because it was a health company. So people were encouraged to weigh in at different points during the day.
Well, and so you're really, in your work and in your book and in your role as an expert in this area, you really are bringing to bear knowledge in creating workshops, facilitating successful workshops, delivering learning, blended learning events, all kinds of different formats, which can take place even, I think, maybe with resume writing or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that some of, that the tips that are in my book, are definitely helpful for anyone who's looking to expand their coaching skills and who works in any capacity with helping people to develop themselves in the workplace.
Michele, what are some of the current challenges facing instructional designers and allied professionals?
Well, I definitely think the freshness of information is a huge challenge because information is changing so quickly.
Right.
And that's why we do have to really consider the method of delivery and the type and the amount of investment that we put into it, because it can change so rapidly. So the easier it is going to be to update at the end of the day is better for everyone, because it will be easier to distribute that information instead of having to rework something that is complicated.
Well, this the book, The Guide to Working with Subject Matter Experts, or SMEs, Key Strategies to Bring Expert Knowledge to Workplace Learning. Michele, is new this year, early spring, late winter, however you want to think about that, in 2022. And it's a book that's been very well received for the expertise that you've brought. What are some of the things that your colleagues say about, after reading your book, The Guide to Working with Subject Matter Experts?
Yeah, so it's the book just came out in February 22, and I've shared it with people in my workplace who have suggested that we use it as as content for a workshop to improve the skills of the SME, not the SMEs, the instructional designers on our team, and it's also been something that has been suggested to be used as a playbook for working with SMEs in general, or to be used when coaching somebody who has to work with an SME and improve their skills. So it's relevant definitely for beginner instructional designers and those who are more experienced and need to hone their skills further.
Well, it's certainly a topic that, I read in your book about, perhaps your origin story relative to instructional design really stems from your love of discovery and finding and hearing a good story.
Yes, I do. I've always been interested in learning about different topics. So that's why I've been fortunate to learn about so many different topics and industries in my career. And I do like a good story. So I do like hearing what the stories that the SMEs have to tell about, tricks of the trade or what happened to them in different experiences. And I've definitely had to develop very good listening skills because, being able to pick out what's important in a long story is really important in terms of being able to put that information into to relevant training materials.
And it's amazing, what you're doing in terms of, moving us from thinking about, not exclusively from thinking about, but from novice to apprentice to journeyman it's a great way that you've helped us to understand this world, both in terms of those kinds of progressions as well as, the world of the new where things change so quickly.
Absolutely. Yeah, we all are developing our skills every day. And so I think the whole idea of working with somebody who knows more than you is something that we can all relate to at the end of the day. And it goes back to that empathy exercise that we spoke about, putting yourself in the shoes of an expert.
And Michele, as we begin to wrap up, just so many great things that I've learned in this conversation. What you help me to do, and I know our audience will benefit, is that you talk about the need for learning. You talk about the why. You've been talking about, what's in it for me? What's in it for the learner? You've been talking about providing context and really working with real life scenarios. It is great. And again, if you would just once again, think ahead into the not so distant future, how do you continue to see the need for instructional designers continue to grow?
Well, I am definitely in the current state seeing a huge need for instructional designers as the market has gone crazy and people are onboarding rapidly. That's a huge need where we come in and help them develop that onboarding program. But I definitely do see that ongoing need for upskilling in the workplace. So developing core capabilities and additional capabilities that allow people to respond rapidly to what's going on in the workplace. And I think you spoke earlier about those soft skills. Those are going to be really important because people are at the heart of every organizational change. That's
great. And I, as an author myself, I know that your book is going to be available on Amazon because where else can we sell books?
Absolutely. Yep. Ebook and in print. And thank you so much, Mike, for the opportunity to talk to you today. I so appreciate it.
If you had, Michele, if you had a parting, advice or guidance for our listeners who are interested in this field, what would that be? And then secondly, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
Yeah, certainly. I'm on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, perfect.
LinkedIn.
Michele Medved, that's
You're right.
Michele. That's not a double L.
No double L there.
So that's just what I want to point out. For those of you who are searching for Michele Medved on LinkedIn, it's E-L-E, and the
Right.
surname is Medved. So
That's correct.
I think she'll be quite easy to find on LinkedIn if you search for Michele Medved.
Right. And I think that what I'm also noticing these days, Mike, is a big transition from teaching into the field of corporate training and learning and development. So I would say, really come back to delighting the customer, and it's going to be about that, how you're going to delight the learner. It's going to be about, making it relevant, making it targeted. And most importantly, who pays the bills? It's the business. And so we want to achieve the business outcomes at the end of the day.
Michele Medved, it's been a delight to have you. Michele Medved, a corporate learning professional, a senior instructional designer with expertise in change management, and author of The Guide to Working with Subject Matter Experts, available on Amazon and other places where you might find your books. Michele, again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike.
It's been a delight. And until the next episode of the Authentic Change podcast, stay well.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll subscribe today and tell a friend about our show. If you're looking for hands-on help to increase your success through authentic change, or have a question you'd like to hear me answer here, please email me at mike@mike-horne.com.